Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of my podcast, Explore and Engage with Anam. In this episode, I would like to talk about something that's happening in California that you may or may not know about. But before I begin, I would just like to mention that, and this may be common knowledge, I think many people out there would agree with me when I say this, that the state of California, the government of California, is very bad at managing money. And whose money are we talking about? The government doesn't have its own money. Whatever money the government has, it comes from the pockets of taxpayers. And so the government of California is very bad at managing American taxpayer money. In fact, the state is facing an approximate $31.5 billion deficit. $31.5 billion deficit. And this tells you that the government of California is not good at managing taxpayer money. Now let me tell you something that I believe everyone needs to know. Every American citizen needs to know about the legislation that I'm going to talk about in this episode. 30 state senators in California voted in favor of a legislation to pay $300 weekly checks to unemployed, undocumented immigrants. 30 liberal state senators in California voted in favor of a legislation that would give $300 weekly checks to unemployed, undocumented immigrants. Can you believe that? Can you believe that, my friends? And this happened recently. 30 state senators voted in favor of this legislation. 7 did not vote in favor of this legislation. So with 30 people voting for it and 7 not voting for it, it was approved in the state Senate. And so this legislation would offer undocumented immigrants up to 20 weeks of unemployment benefits. Now, there are some work requirements, but those are minimal work requirements. Any applicant who applies to get this benefit would have to self-attest having earned at least $1,300 over 3 months, or the applicant would have to self-attest having worked at least 93 hours over 3 months. 93 hours over 3 months. Think about it. A full work week, 8 hours a day, that means 40 hours a week. A full work week is 40 hours of work. 2 full work weeks are 80 hours of work. 3 full work weeks are 120 hours of work. So an applicant would have to self-attest having worked 93 hours over 3 months. So that's not even 3 full work weeks over a period of 3 months. And once again, the applicant would have to self-attest. This is ridiculous. Somebody has to ask, who are these state senators working for? Are they working for American citizens? This is just unbelievable what's happening in the state of California. And so, my friends, this is something that the California State Senate approved. Now the question is, will Governor Gavin Newsom support this legislation? Let me tell you about Governor Gavin Newsom. He calls California a sanctuary state. I talked about New York City being a sanctuary city. I talked about the city of Chicago being a sanctuary city. But California is a sanctuary state, according to Governor Gavin Newsom. It seems that these liberal politicians, they support policies that takes money away from hardworking American citizens to give the funds to undocumented migrants. Look at Chicago. I talked about this in a previous episode. The city council in Chicago approved allocating $51 million to provide housing and other services to migrants. To foreign nationals who crossed the US-Mexico border to enter the United States. And that happened in Chicago. And that $51 million fund, it would only last for a month. $51 million of taxpayer funds going towards migrants. And in California, 30 liberal politicians in the state Senate voted in favor of this legislation to pay $300 weekly checks to undocumented, unemployed, undocumented immigrants. This is happening in California. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Share with me your thoughts. Go to my website, tawsifanam.net. Let me know what you think. Share with me your views and opinions. Send me a message. And anyone who has been listening to my podcast probably already knows that in this podcast I talk about social and political issues, both domestic and international, and I will continue to do so. And the border crisis is something that I will continue to talk about. The migrant crisis in places like New York and Chicago, those are topics that I will continue to talk about. And as I find more updates, I will share my views and opinions and my comments on these things. But I also want to hear from you what your views are. So share with me your thoughts. With that, I will conclude this episode. Thank you for continuing to listen to my podcast, and I hope to be back again soon with a new episode.